So, on today's episode of Recruiting Roundtable, we are discussing recruitment automation. We're going to take a deep dive into software and tools that make recruiting more efficient, and hopefully, more importantly, improve the candidate experience. Because I think that's what we all are striving for. Joining us today, we have two very qualified people to speak about this who know a lot about recruiting tools. I know this because I spoke to them before the show, and they gave me some thoughts. So, I'm looking forward to diving deeper into it. I have Dax Sardinha, Global Head of Talent Acquisition at ApplyBoard, and Sean Kelley, who we're going to be calling SK today, just so that we can keep things a little bit organized. Sean Kelley, Director of Global Talent Acquisition at Observe AI. Dax, SK, thank you so much for joining.
Oh, happy to be here.
Thanks for having us, Sean.
Of course, guys. Okay, let's start with a few intros. Please just do a short intro of yourself and a little bit of your background and maybe a bit about your company. Let's start with Sean.
Yeah. So I'm Sean. So as Sean mentioned, I am leading all of global talent acquisition here at Observe. Really been in the recruiting space for probably now the last 12 years, really in the SaaS environment, pre-IPO acquisitions, late stages. How I got my start into recruiting it goes all the way back to even college. I mean, funny enough, I have a background in economics. Didn't know how I was going to imply that, but somehow, some way, it gets used into recruiting every single day, thinking about historical trends, hiring best practices. Funny enough, it's kept me engaged for the last 12 years. It's evolved a lot since that beginning stage, and still excited to see kind of what recruiting has become over the last decade.
Awesome, thank you, Sean. And Dax?
Yeah, so similar to SK, I'm in the global head of talent acquisition for ApplyBoard. So we hire globally for ed tech and sales individuals that support our partners, B2B and C2C. SaaS environment as well, technology space. Also, my background is one of those unique people that I've been doing this for over 20 years, and I fell into talent acquisitions. I didn't go to school for it. Many people who started in the mid 90s kind of fell into it. I started in the agency world, worked my way into financial institutions after agency, from there into insurance, and then startup in real estate space, and now into the ed tech world. So it has been a journey. Started in technology, kind of currently in technology again, moving between finance and real estate and insurance. So it's a fun ride all the way through. And I think, as Sean alluded to, or SK alluded to, there's always that unique piece about talent, and we help move organizations forward. At the end of the day, doesn't matter what the company is about; it's about the people that help drive it. So it's a great space to be in, and been doing it for 20 years. Looking forward to another 20 years.
That's great. Thank you, Dax. And last but not least, my name is Sean Huynh. I'm Managing Director at Rocket. I'm also the VP of Sales at Hireflow, our sister company. I guess we're all talking about our backgrounds. I mean, I started my career in financial services and then went into software sales. I was at Salesforce for a few years. I really got into recruiting. I was working for an app development company, and that's when I really realized how important developers were to a lot of the companies we're working with. And then I just realized that, companies need great people, and you need people to find great people. So I started an agency, and then fast forward, now I'm at Rocket and I host this podcast. So looking forward to learning more from both of you gentlemen today. I want to spend just a little bit more time just on the origins story again. Like, I know some of you talked about you falling into recruiting, but let's just dig a little bit deeper into that, because I asked this question and maybe 1% of the guests say I went to school for HR and I was going to be a recruiter. Yeah. Pretty much everyone else gives me another story, which I'm interested in. So maybe we'll start with Dax. You mentioned, it wasn't the initial plan. So walk me through the early days.
Yeah, not the initial plan at all. I went to university for geoscience and then geological drilling technician. So nowhere near the HR world. And I had a friend who was working in an agency and said, Dax, about technology and, about IT, and why don't you come and interview? And I sat down for an interview, not knowing anything about recruitment. I didn't even know it was a career, to be quite frank, much less, a lifelong passion of mine. And I sat down, loved it from day one. Love the aspect of sales and technology and just the mixture of all of that together, and of course the nuance of dealing with people. So yeah, it started off with a random sit down with a friend's boss that turned into a lifelong career in an agency, and then just developed from there.
No, that's cool. SK?
Yeah, I mean, I think similar to Dax, I feel like in talent acquisition recruiting, you fall into it. It's not where you say, hey, this is what I want to do with my career. I think we both said, like, when we're young, oh, I want to be an astronaut or firefighter. I don't think if I told my daughter that I'm a recruiter, she'd be like, oh, what do you even actually do? And I think to Dax's point is like you're really trying to maneuver a lot of different pieces that are going on because it is an aspect of sales, it's an aspect of marketing, but we're also dealing with, the human empathy and emotion that goes attached to it as well too. And Sean, you kind of alluded to is like you need people to find people, but it's also finding the right people that are going to be the right additions to your company because talent is your best asset, but at the same
Mhm.
time too, like we both know that if you hire the wrong people, it can have such a huge detriment to your workforce. So it is a combination of like knowing some type of psychology, understanding what are the values that they bring in. So it's unique, but somehow, as Dax mentioned, like it is a passion. Like you find a way that you're trying to really betterment not only your company, but you're also doing your due diligence to help an individual find sometimes their career, if not something that is life changing.
Mhm. I totally hear what you're saying. I know there's some companies out there that will try to quantify the cost of a bad hire, but I don't think you can. It could have huge implications, right? If you hire a bad manager and a bunch of people leave because they're just a horrible leader, it could have huge implications to your company. Um, I want to talk a little bit about recruiting process and what you think has changed in the last 12 months. We've seen from let's say 2020, uh, there was obviously the pandemic, which changed the entire world. Then there was, kind of this growth in tech where post pandemic companies were hiring like crazy. Then we saw a lot of layoffs, and you know, we're seeing things kind of like level out a little bit in the last 6 months or so. But I'm curious from each of your perspectives, what have you seen in terms of changes in recruiting process over the last year? Like, have you been more aggressive in hiring? Have you been less aggressive? Have you seen are you using tools more? Like, just what have you generally seen? Maybe we'll start with SK.
Yeah. I mean, this is something that it gets brought up, I feel like, on a daily basis. I think just with leadership to understand what more could we be doing. And I mean, you talked about like, pre-pandemic, like we were in that special space of SaaS where it was just grow, grow, grow at all costs. You see
Hmm.
massive amount of valuations of companies. I mean, you think about WeWork and Uber, like, $40 billion. And you start seeing that uptick even during COVID at the same time is like, companies were really excelling. But the hard part is that, you get to that stage of like, what do we do after this? What do we kind of expect? Because you can have a lot of those highs, but there's also the lows. It's the ebbs and flows that comes with the recruiting. It's the same thing in the business case too. And so I think looking at the recruiting process, it went from grow at all costs to hiring anybody who is available and having a huge talent war to now to the part where it does get to part where things get drawn out because we talked about like each hire matters. It's
Hmm.
not just saying, hey, I want to bring in one person who's going to do a 1x. The companies are now figuring out, great, how do I do more with less? How do I find individuals that are going to be able to do 3, 4, 5x of what the next person could be able to do? It does put a little more pressure on the hiring side because you do want to get that right, but at the same time, it's hard to really quantify that number until maybe even a year later. I mean, we talk
Hmm.
about where best quality hire comes from. Is it referrals? Is it your network? Is it your, passive outreach? It's a lot of different variables you're trying to help understand. I think the businesses are really starting to trying to understand what really does the value of each employee bring into that. So the recruiting process becomes, not just so much from, hey, a quantity and keeping up with demand. It's now coming down to the intangibles. What are they bringing to us that we don't have? Does
Hmm.
this really fall into what the business is trying to build for the future? And are they part of it? Do they see themselves for a couple of years versus like, oh, is this a one stop for the next year and then they move on? Like, it's that same type of investment that a company wants to give in, knowing that hopefully the candidate employees can be able to get that back.
Hmm. Hmm. Definitely hearing that a lot. It's pretty consistent theme on this podcast, doing more with less, whether that's in terms of the people that you're hiring or even like within talent teams, right? Like can you be more efficient with who you have in your team as opposed to just bringing more people? Dax, what are your
Yeah, I love what SK was saying there. I agree with everything you just said. You go from a pool of scarcity of talent into more available talent, but not necessarily the right talent for organizations. And that's where, I think from a process change, a lot of organizations have had to shift, and teams have had to shift from a post and pray mindset and now to a now active targeted strategy where you're engaging talent directly and looking for that passive talent pool, individuals that would be open to opportunities but aren't necessarily going to apply to your roles. And we become, and SK alluded to this as well, we've become brand ambassadors, marketers. We have so many different hats that talent acquisitions had to wear over the last 12 months to be able to attract talent. And technology is just one aspect of it, where the right tools to search, to find, to source talent is critical, because you are doing more with less. That means your teams are leaner. That means they have to be more effective, more efficient, and they also have to use tools such as AI and machine learning to be more effective in how they're engaging talent, and really giving that personalized approach to not just sourcing but in engagement.
Well, while we're on this topic, I want to park AI for a second, because I think that there's a whole Pandora's box there. But I want to talk about just tooling, which is the whole reason we're here, right? Can you share some of the really key tools in your recruiting stack, Dax, that you kind of lean on? Maybe we'll start with a few. We'll have SK give a few, and then we'll kind of dig deeper into each of those.
Yeah, there's a few that I like to lean on that we may not necessarily be using here, but I've used in my past lives. So number one, tools like Seekout is an example where, and again, I want to preference that I don't recommend any platform over another. There are a few tools that are very similar, but a tool like Seekout is an example that gives you a broader reach of the marketplace, and especially in the tech space, where it really gives you a good understanding of who's available, who's out there, and help you map the talent so that you're not just going blind. Then it's the assessment side of it. Right. So how do you assess the talent once you've identified it? As SK alluded to, just because you have the skill set doesn't mean you're the right fit for the cultural environment, much less for the organization as a whole. So you're measuring skills using tools like Hacker Ranker as an example, using other assessments out there. There's companies like Self-Management Group as an example that have some really good assessment tools that are psychometric validated to be able to measure quote unquote fit for the organization and fit for that culture, and even fit down to the team level if you get that right benchmark going. But again, I got a preference. All of these are just tools, right, to help enable the team to make sure that they are as effective and efficient as possible. And it could be just as simple as having a questionnaire set up in your applicant tracking system, so that when people are applying, that you're filtering the cream of the crop to the top, so you're getting to them first and foremost, versus having to weed through 150 resumes that may be coming in a day. Just to find that diamond in the rough. So lots of great tools out there. I could talk all day about the tools, but I want to make sure that SK gets a chance.
No, well, we are gonna definitely, we're gonna spend the next 20 minutes talking about tools. So I want to stay with you for a sec on Seekout. Tell me about Seekout. Like, I know I've heard obviously a number of different people using Seekout. What do you like about it from a sourcing perspective?
What I like about it goes beyond the current platform. So LinkedIn is a fantastic tool. I think most people have LinkedIn Recruiter right now. Most organizations do, or they have an Indeed platform or something along those lines. They are the top two right now in the marketplace. And they're great tools, but they are limited to people that are in their platform. Seekout goes beyond the platforms. They're platform agnostic, so they will find talent in Indeed, they'll find talent in LinkedIn, and kind of bring it all together for you. So you're not having to use 5 or 6 different tools to be able to find the top talent. But also it gives you some great data, and give you some data insights into organizations as well, to understand what's the movement look like for organizations. So if there's specific companies that you want to target and find talent from, you can actually go into that tool, type in the company's name, and it will tell you who are all the people that have been working in that organization, how many people have moved from that organization or moved into that organization. So it really gives you some unique insights that you can leverage, not just in your sourcing and your attracting strategy, but also in your conversations with hiring leaders. If they're looking for that purple squirrel that doesn't really exist, you can actually do that search and show them and say, listen, here's what you're looking for. Here's what I recommend, right? And then you kind of get to that unique space of agreement where you're not getting everything, they're not getting everything, but you've gotten to that ability to actually find the talent that they're looking for, versus that purple squirrel that doesn't really exist in life.
Yeah. That's really cool. I mean, it's interesting because a lot of some of those things that you mentioned, we've been doing here at Rocket, also with HireFlow as well. So it's just interesting that there's there's certain tools, like a lot of them, there's overlap, right? But then there's some things that some tools do really, really well, and others like, are not as good at. So I'm just interested to hear kind of your feedback and seek out. Thanks for that.
Yeah,
Let's stay
and,
on
and
the
just one more thing
Yeah.
before you jump into SK there. It's just, the data aspect. I can't say that enough, right? I think one thing that we miss out on in talent acquisition is that we are so reactive in many cases, and we don't take advantage of the data aspects that some of our tools provide. And as I said, I'm not, I'm agnostic from any tool that can give me what I need. I'm sure Rocket does fantastic work as well, but it's being able to go just beyond just the finding of the talent to what's the data telling us about the talent.
Yeah.
Sorry,
That's a
back
great
over to
point.
you.
No worries. SK, let's stay on sourcing. I know when we talked a little bit about it, I know you mentioned, you still think LinkedIn is probably the one of, if not the best tool, but I'm curious, from a sourcing perspective, what are some of the things that you really lean on?
Yeah, I mean, even to Dax's point, like just talk about the tools and systems. I mean, at the end of the day, like there is a plentiful out in the marketplace today. I mean, we can talk about our ATS sourcing, analytics tools. It really comes down to really understanding kind of what the business is asking you for. And you can be able to kind of craft and build out the right tool set that really facilitates not only what their ask is and what data they're looking for, but also understanding, great, where do you actually sit within your company lifestyle? Because there are some companies that are like massive that need to have an all-in-one solution workday to be able to facilitate everything across the board. So like TA kind of just runs through it. But I think to your point, looking at sourcing, where I see, LinkedIn has had a huge opportunity within the marketplace. I mean, this was built for professionals by professionals. The thing is that over time, you're starting to add in other layers to it. And we as talent start to realize, great, where do actually people have the best response? And Dax said that you look and try to figure out, great, where is the data telling us that we're going to have the best interactions with candidates, whether they're active, passive, or coming from our networks. And I think what I've seen from my exposure is that sales, marketing, TA, anything that seems to be more, frontward business facing are very active on LinkedIn. They usually use it kind of as their social boards. But when we start thinking about engineering, they're more focused on, great, what am I doing to kind of showcase the work that I'm building on? So they have more of their platforms. We're using HackerRank to get the best data to tell that right source, but also where are they showcasing that work? Are they out doing hackathons? Like we have to be able to understand where we need to go after for the right talent versus just using one source. It would be fantastic if we had one thing that could do everything, but that would be a huge monopoly in the world space. But I think as we've seen within the talent acquisition world is that it is a constantly evolving, adapting. I mean, Dax, we could probably talk about what ATSs were 10 years ago and where they are today. And you can see the evolution of where a lot has really been able to either move off of or people have had a preference towards because of the information, but also what they're able to get back to the business on. Like for me personally, I've always been a huge Greenhouse fanatic. Like I love the tool and I've been such a big advocate for it. But I know there's others that love Lever, love JobVite, love Workday because of the things that they get. So it really comes down to is, we do have our own kind of personal preferences, but at the same time, we kind of have to kind of put that aside to say, great, what do we need to really facilitate that the business is looking for and how we go and assess the right talent that we want to bring into the organization.
So I want to stay on topic of ATS because that's the backbone of any kind of recruitment, recruiting stack, right? SK, you mentioned Greenhouse. You also mentioned Lever and a few others. Dax, what are your thoughts on ATS? Like, what are some that you've used or some that you really enjoy using?
Yeah, it's those are fighting words right there. I think the challenge is there's no perfect ATS. I think to SK's point, it really is what are you trying to get out of the system. If I go back far enough, Taleo was like the end all be all ATS system. It integrated to Outlook. It was
I
great
remember
reporting.
I remember applying through Taleo for sure.
Yeah, there you go. It had lots of functionality that we only wished we had back in the day. From different ATS systems. But it really comes down to the organization. I think most companies now are dealing with like a greenhouse as an example, or a liver, but usually they're now shifting to an end-to-end platform. So you're really falling underneath the full HRIS system. We're doing it here today. We're under Workday. I've helped implement multiple Workday instances in various organizations. So is there a perfect one out there? No. Selfishly, I do like Greenhouse just because of the extra bolt-ons. I mean, all the various, open source tools that you can add into it as well. There's fantastic. If you are restricted though, Lever is probably my number two, close follow-up number two, just because it has a lot of the social media aspects that Workday and others are missing, unless you get those bolt-ons like Phenom People. If I had Phenom People on top of Workday, well, it's as good or better than any other ATS that I've had, just because of that CRM overlay. So it's tough to just give you one, Sean, but that's kind of my preferences in a nutshell.
I know when we did our pre-show, you mentioned Phenom People delivers a really great candidate experience. Can you tell us more about that? I'd love to understand more about like what you mean by that.
Yeah, and they were one of the first that came out that became Workday's premier partner in that space. And from a talent acquisition perspective, it really gives a strong candidate experience in the sense that there's this was back before AI was more famous than it is now, where there's bots that are helping drive expectations and experiences. So a candidate can go to a website and they might not know what they're looking for, and Phenom will actually take them through that journey and say, well, what type of job do you like based off of your profile? Like, it will read into your LinkedIn profile as an example and give you some recommendations and give you that search journey that you don't have in many ATS systems these days without that extra overlay. And that empowers not just the candidate experience, but also empowers the talent acquisition experience as well, because you are now getting people that have been kind of carried through the process, if you will, which means that you don't have to have the more in-depth conversations that you have been having about fit, because they've gone through that journey with using tools like Phenom. Again, the other piece that gives you that, all the great things that a CRM does, it gives you that ability to have the trickle campaigns and reach out to people that may be more passive, that have looked at your site but never applied. So you can engage talent in a different and unique way. And of course, you get the benefit of having alumni as well, where you can reach out to people that have left the organization. Hopefully, you get some boomerang talent. So it's an enabler tool. There's a few like it out there, but Phenom was my first experience to it, so it's always near and dear to my heart when I think about that CRM, that candidate experience, and how can it improve the work that we do, but also improve that candidate experience for our applicants.
Right. And SK, in our pre-show, you were talking about CRM and you mentioned Gem. Tell me a little bit about Gem and what you like about Gem.
I mean, when Gem first came out, I mean, it was primarily great. How do you build out more of a sourcing tool to help really scrape out and find emails on top of what LinkedIn was doing? But over the years, I mean, even, seeing what Steve has done, from that perspective, is that he's really transformed the tool to, as Dax said, to have it all inclusive of one piece of technology, where you have recruiting be able to sit underneath one full purview. Because you have your ATSs, you have your CRMs, you have your candidate experience, you have scheduling. But the thing is, like, not all the times are going to help integrate. Now, it has improved over time where they're able to kind of work and talk with each other, but that number and what you're spending, it adds up. And as recruiting, as we talked about, we have to find ways to do more with less. Now, if we don't have a full team or a full list of people or tools, what can we do to really maximize that? And seeing what Gem has done, it went from being sourcing to building out analytics. They were one of the first ones to start actually showcasing diversity and inclusion. To think about, women and men in the workspace. What does that percentage look like? That's still a huge topic today about what really is diversity in your environment and how that really translates into a company's overall success. And as of late, they've now built out their own ATS, similar to kind of what Rippling has done, Ashby. So you're starting to see a transformation where a lot of tools, or I guess companies, are trying to be very inclusive of having everything underneath one full purview. And as Zach said about Workday, is it may not be fully perfect in all aspects, but the key part is that they're able to have everyone sit in that one realm versus losing out on that potential market space. So I feel like in the next couple of years, especially with, the evolution of technology and AI, you'll start to see more companies that are probably going through more acquisitions to kind of have more underneath everything versus having 6 different products underneath one. Sorry, not 6 products, is having 6 different products under 6 different umbrellas, by having those 6 same products underneath one umbrella.
So
Yeah,
we
sorry, I'm just
Go ahead,
gonna jump in on that because you're bang on, and I'm seeing it already, SK, where organizations are buying up the smaller companies or building their own tools to make the other companies obsolete. We saw it with SMS texting. We saw it with various different Twitter feeders. We've seen it with various different social media communicator tools, and ATS, companies, or HRIS companies, I guess those are being called these days, are just building themselves or buying out the other companies to have more of that all-inclusive space. And really the focus is on 2 things that I see: candidate experience, number 1, and candidate engagement. Like, how are you going after talent? And talent's not looking at emails anymore, right? They want that text message. That's how they're applying for jobs. That's how they're being notified for jobs. And if you don't have that capability, then you're missing out on talent. But yeah, to SK's point, absolutely, they're becoming more all-in-one tools versus specialty tools that you're bolting on additional pieces to.
Yeah, and then Sean, before I know you want to hop in, I think as Dax mentioned, is thinking about really the type of persona that you're trying to engage with. And as the engagement piece is so valid because, we talk about our baby boomers, we talk about Gen X, Gen Y, Gen Z, millennials, now into alphas, is like, what is the best way that they communicate? And how are they going to actually want to be able to find a way to actually work within the workspace, but also how they want to be able to have that type of communication style with. And as you talked about, like within social media, is understanding, great. First, it was Facebook, then you had Twitter. Now we're getting into Instagram, TikTok. Like, a lot of companies are trying to figure out, great, because this is the future talent. How do we find ways to keep that engagement? Because if it's not now, how do we solve for that future? And those 2 pieces of experience and engagement are so invaluable, where I think it has taken a little bit more of a hit during, I think this real slowdown within tech, because a lot of companies have put experience down to the bottom because the teams are so small that if you're able to really make a dividend, or even if the person doesn't even get the job, but they have the right experience, it transcends the ability for people to go and talk about what your company's doing well at, because it's that rule of thumb where you need 7 positive things to help counteract 1 negative approach. And that's why that candidate experience is so invaluable, because if you can do that right, even through times of difficulty, you're going to be in a much better position when things start to pick up, because people have that right representation, or at least the right knowledge of who you are as a company and how you are engaging.
Yeah. So I wanted to just ask about, what are some of the potential benefits and challenges of this consolidation that we're talking about, right? Because we've seen it in the past where a company would swallow up another company, but then I don't know, just something changes, like the essence of what made them special kind of goes away when it gets swallowed up by kind of the big corporation. So curious, from both of your perspectives, like what you see as the potential benefits, and also maybe some of the drawbacks that could happen with maybe some of these more niche solutions being acquired by larger kind of larger products or corporations. I'll start with Dax.
Yeah, I would say it's a great call out, because there are benefits and minuses to all of this. And I think one of the things that I see is the benefit is you get more of an all-in-one solution so you get bigger bang for your buck, right? And where SK was alluding to before earlier that we have to do more with less. That includes our budgets, right? So how are we able to scrape and be more effective and efficient with the money that we have that is aligned to our tools that we use, not just the people that we have. So there's that piece of it. And of course the integration comes along. You get improved reporting, and you get a benefit of being able to have truly that end-to-end suite of data that when it's disconnected, you don't necessarily get. And of course, ease of use, because it's all integrated. You move someone through the phases, and you get the automatic execution, or the automatic actions that happen from one tool to another. The downside that I see is number 1, you start to lose innovation. When they're smaller organizations, that they're bolt-on tools that really have to engage and work with these larger ATS systems to make their product that much better. You get really cool stuff, and you get really nice integrations. You get really nice ways of being able to leverage the tools over and above what you may even have thought you needed. And you lose that, I think, when they get swallowed up by these large companies and they kind of just become another thing. And you lose, to your point, you kind of lose a little bit that shine when you're not dealing with those smaller boutique companies that do bolt-ons. And then, oh, by the way, we're coming out with the next innovation and we're coming out with another innovation. You get stagnant in products and you don't necessarily get the latest, greatest version or the greatest idea on how to make something better. So you definitely lose out on that aspect of it when they're swallowed up, in my opinion.
Yeah, not to mention some of the bureaucracy and red tape that comes with some of these big organizations.
That's right, and the larger the tool or the more things it touches, guess what? More people want to be involved in the decision making process.
This coming from a guy who used to work at some of the biggest banks in Canada, so you know all about that, right?
That's right.
SK?
Yeah, I mean, I think as Dax talked about, is like it's great to have everything under one, but it's where you start having your trade-offs. What are the things that you would like to have, or things that you're hopeful that they're going to be able to elaborate on? It's the hard part is that as companies acquire is that they are acquiring the technology, but what made that special is that you have a company that's solely focused on that. But when you're brought into like the full umbrella purview, like it may not be where they're focusing on, great, how do we continue to innovate, and more about like, hey, we might need just to maintain this because at least we have the market share. It's something, but we're not going to add more into it. I mean, we talk even about Lever and Job Vibe both now being underneath employees umbrella, so like are they able to do as much as they used to? Probably not, because as Dax said, like you have the bureaucracy that comes with it, where you have more decision makers that are making the calls. So when you're lean, you're able to move fast, but when you start getting into the larger spaces, you have red tape, you have decision makers, people that want to be involved. So it definitely kind of sometimes stagnates the ability to do that. Even though you might have everything there, you might find, let's say, of the 10 tools, 3 or 4 are really optimal, and the other 6 are like, they're nice to have, but it won't be able to give you as much as you would like to have. I mean, we can talk about like other companies that have seen the same thing. I mean, Salesforce being able to acquire MuleSoft and Slack and Tableau, or Amazon getting Whole Foods and One Medical. Like it's so indifferent with what their true scope of work is, but they're trying to really capture the full marketplace. And, that's what a business is trying to do, because, for them to still stay competitive is say, great, what more can we do on top of what we're doing today? And as we've seen that, with the introduction of AI, like it can transform the entire marketplace. I mean, look at NVIDIA. 5 years ago, $30 a share. They already have to do a complete stock split, being worth, over 1,200 before that case. So anything can happen. And I think as a company, you want to make sure you're trying to be ahead of the curve, which is why we're starting to see more of that inclusivity of having everything underneath one full purview.
You bring up so many good points. I think about Amazon, and when they first came out, they were selling books, right? And where would Amazon be without AWS? I'm curious. Right?
Good question. I mean, probably Jeff Bezos would probably be able to answer that. I mean, we can only make the assumptions or guesses of what it could be, but it sometimes, as we've seen, like it's the right time, it's the right space, and knowing when and how to action that. Sometimes it is a little bit of luck. Sometimes it is, a little bit of that grit. It's a combination of both that really make some of the companies the most successful. And I think that's kind of where talent needs to be, is that you kind of need to also adapt to what's coming ahead, because the sooner that you're able to do that, you can put yourself in the best position to use the best sources, the resources that make the most sense for you, but also how to really resonate with what your business wants, but also what and how to engage with the market.
So this is gonna be the last question. We got a couple minutes left, maybe about 4 minutes. So you give everyone about 2 minutes to answer this. Think about it. I parked AI, and I'm like, man, we could do a whole nother episode on AI. So let's think about AI. Where do you see the biggest opportunity with AI in the next? I don't even want to think 5 years, because who knows what the world will look at 5 years. In the next 1 to 2 years, where do you see the biggest opportunity with AI as it relates to recruiting? Let's go with Dax.
Yeah, definitely a much longer conversation, 2 minutes, but I'll try to keep it succinct. Number one, candidate experience, personalized experience, assessing that personal assistant piece. So if you think about from a candidate journey, they apply, they're engaged right away, they're assessed right away. They're scheduled for hiring leaders immediately based off of the availability of calendars. Hiring leaders are able to provide feedback into the AI tool, and they're able to make decisions with unbiased or as lack of bias as possible in their decision making, all the way through to onboarding and orientation, that you now get a specialized, personalized experience of how you onboard to what your life cycle is going to be at the organization. So I think it's going to be huge for us, or continue to be huge for us as it grows. But in a nutshell, that's what I see in the next, I'll say 12 to 24 months.
SK?
I think to Dax's point, it comes down to really the speed and the ability to kind of evaluate talent faster and creating the best experience possible. And I think with the introduction of AI, like this is such a broad and large topic, as it has both the pros and cons. We've seen people say, great, AI dictates whether or not my resume gets passed through or not. I mean, there's always going to be some part of human element that TA, you just can't replace from these types of conversations. But the more part is like, how do you really optimize for the things that you end up spending most of your time on? And, for us right now, it probably is a lot of, resume reviews, and going through that, but also scheduling a lot of the kind of ticky stack stuff that adds up to that overall process. And I think it can come down to really about how we truly evaluate and find the tools that really are in capturing what we want and what we need to kind of really focus on. I mean, as Dax said about Phenom People, if you build the right experience and it's personalized and it's tailored, and you do that for each person, it makes it special. Because if you get the same approach every single other place, you're like, what makes this place different? What would make me want to come work here? So I think we'll start seeing a lot more of that personalized touch that AI is going to be able to create, because it's going to learn and adapt and understand not just what the company wants, but what the candidate is looking for.
These are all really great points. I mean, I guess my final thoughts on this is, I would love to see the day where ghosting doesn't happen anymore, right? I can't, every single day I go on LinkedIn, at least one person is writing a long story about how they were ghosted after going through 17 interviews and spending the last 6 weeks. So I think, if we could just do that, to Dax's point about the candidate experience, and just kind of provide updates to the candidates and just ensure no candidates goes ghosted, I think the world would be a better place.
Agreed.
There you go. So I don't know, maybe the three of us, we can develop it and we'll become billionaires or something.
There you go.
SK, Dax, thanks so much for your time. I really appreciate it. I learned a ton today. Hopefully you guys did too. For those listening, thank you for tuning in. Until next time, happy hunting. Thanks, guys.
Thanks, Sean.
Thanks, Sean.